Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes. Joining me now is Michelle Bacharach, founder and CEO of Find Mine. Michelle, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
Of course, and before we dive into the conversation, can you explain what Find Mine is?
Yeah, so I think like most founders, I started a company to solve my own problem, which is that I'm not the most stylish person. I don't have an eye for interior design. I don't know how to do a smoky eye. And I found that when I would walk by a window display in a retail store, I would be like, whoa, yes, this, all of it. That's my aspirational life, right? And I feel like a lot of consumers have that struggle. So I started asking brands and retailers, like, why don't you just do that for every product you sell? And what I found is that there's just not enough resources in the world to do a window display for every single thing that most retailers and brands sell. So they get about 5% or 10% of the product catalog into those inspirational moments. And then consumers like you and me are sort of left without that for everything else. So what FindMine does is we apply artificial intelligence to deeply understand sort of the brand's creative vision so we can do that inspiration for every single product in the catalog, and the consumer gets more of that more of the time.
I want to read some numbers. WWD reported that FindMine raised nearly $9 million in Series A funding, bringing the total raise to $17.6 million. So first, a big congratulations. But second, the company was founded in 2014. This was a few years before the generative AI boom of late 2022. So how did you get investors on board so early?
Great question. And I think that like this fundraising round that we just did was like the easiest I've ever experienced, partly because I've been beating the drum for AI for 10 years. And a lot of times people would be like, cool, but like, what's the market for this? Or cool, but I don't really understand it. And so now the fact that we are here in this moment and the market's fully developed for it, people are like leaning in to AI. And the fact that we kind of grew up on this old school, if you will, style of discriminative AI, which is really about like taking the data in to understand what it means, and then blended that with the generative side, which is really about producing something that is typically done by a human, is really how we crack the nut on getting that right blend of AI to really deliver high quality results for what we do.
That's really interesting that you saw this coming a decade ago, but did you expect to see AI where we are now then?
I think that I mean, it's obviously changing every single day. And I have this reputation in my own company of being like AI skeptic because I keep having the worst possible user experience every time I ask ChatGPT to answer something for me. So this is a running joke. I'll screenshot it and send it to everyone. So I'm constantly being surprised by what AI can and can't do in this moment. And I think that, if we would circle back to 10 years ago and I forecasted what the future might look like, I think there was maybe one or two things that I saw that actually came to fruition. And then everything else has just surprised me and will continue to do so, just given the pace of change in AI.
AI has touched really every industry from education, obviously now fashion. How has it impacted retail overall?
Great question. So for our customers who are predominantly like Fortune 500 brands, they might be internet retailer top 500 type customers. So they're big companies. They have lots of scale. What we're doing for them is we're getting $89 million in incremental revenue because we're inspiring their customer, the consumer, more frequently, which is causing brand loyalty to go up. So we're actually seeing that customer come back and buy again more frequently. They're coming back for one of our top 500 internet retailer companies 8% more frequently. So that repeat purchase effect is building a more loyal customer. And the impact of that really can't be understated in a industry where people are sort of like, you buy once from that brand and then never again. So the financial impact is very real, but then also the sort of just what you can do with AI when you don't have limitations of hours in the day or people getting tired or all that stuff just unlocks this whole world of possibility. And in retail in particular, there's so much data. Think about how many products, how many customers, how many data points, products go in and out of stock, everything changes. That's a blessing and a curse when you talk about AI.
FindMine is fashion focused. And when you're talking about, hey, maybe I wasn't the most fashionable person, when you said that at the beginning, that really resonated with me. I don't know how to do a smoky eye either. I don't have an eye to put everything together. So the product resonates with a lot of women. AI, as we know, is a very male-dominated field. So how did you get investors to come onto this? And was it harder, especially as a woman, going into a male-dominated field?
Great question. I definitely feel like I had the push and pull because fashion is female dominated, and we do, you know, beauty and home, and those tend to be spaces where there's just more women, maybe not at the leadership levels as much as they should be, but then we have also the AI side, and our AI technology is very, very deep and very, very robust. So I kind of had to play both sides of it, and I think one thing that really helped me get investors excited in this round in particular is the length of history we have, because there's so many companies coming in that are, you know, FindMind's AI first and use case specific, and I think that's a big differentiator. There's so many companies coming in trying to solve something in retail, trying to solve styling, and then bolting on AI on top of it. It's just not differentiated. And so if you're an investor putting money in, it's like, well, anyone has access to these technologies. How do I know you're going to be the one to succeed? The fact that we have proprietary and very deep data sets on what we do, I think just put us kind of to the top of the list and helped overcome some of that, you know, there's just less people looking like me in this field.
Let's talk about that a little more, because as we know, AI has disrupted industry after industry over the last year and a half. So how does FindMind differentiate itself in this field aside from the longevity?
Great question. So the first thing is that there's kind of these two camps within AI, discriminative and generative, that I mentioned before. So the discriminative stuff is sort of more old school, and then the generative is like kind of the new shiny object. And we believe that you need both in order to succeed in this particular pursuit, which is styling. The reason for that is, if you think about generative AI and the big players in the space, Google, Amazon, Meta, et cetera, you can ask it, hey, make me a style guide, make me a lookbook, right? And maybe you're Abercrombie. And if you ask it that, it might give you something that looks like American Eagle. That's a really scary place for brands to be, because they want to differentiate from each other. They don't want to look the same. And so this generative AI that is trained on sort of the wisdom of the crowds collapses the differentiation between those brands. And that's exactly what FindMind solves. To solve that, we have to use that discriminative side of things to deeply understand brand. We actually map brand in multidimensional space, which is a crazy thing to kind of picture. But being able to articulate what is brand to an AI using computer speak, using vectorization, is the way we're actually able to then tell generative AI, make me a lookbook that looks like brand X, and have it actually look precisely like brand X.
Can you dive a little deeper in there? How are you distinguishing brand to brand? Because when you think of Abercrombie and American Eagle, they have similar looks. So how are you breaking those down?
Yeah, so as a consumer from the outside, and we don't work with either of those, I'm just using them as examples here, like you can see that they're similar in some ways, and you maybe get a sense of how they might be different, but maybe not. And that's kind of where you stop thinking about it, right? Because you're a consumer, you just kind of move on with your day. If you work for either one of those brands, if you're the creative director of either of those brands, they can rattle off a whole bunch of ways that they're different. But they also don't have the vocabulary to describe in like human language exactly what is specific and unique about each of those. So if they were to crack open OpenAI or, you know, Stability or any of these kind of LLM technologies and like try to teach it what their brand is about, what ends up happening is all the promise of time savings that generative AI is here to tout, you end up losing, because you have to torture yourself into a pretzel to try to explain to it what is it about your brand. And that's really the thing that FindMind has become uniquely good at, is to very quickly get a sense of what it is to mean, what does this brand mean, basically, and then feed it into all these different models for the different outputs that look high enough quality.
Meta, as I'm sure you know, is coming out with smart Ray-Bans that provide outfit inspiration. So how does FindMind differentiate itself from those types of products?
Yeah. So first of all, we're not competing with Meta. That's sort of the wisdom of the crowd's like styling response, which has its place in time. Where you're getting dressed, I just want to know, like, quick fit check, is this okay? Am I going to get, you know, laughed at in the moms, you know, group that I go to if I wear this, right? There's a very specific purpose for that. And then there's also like the leadership and expertise of an individual brand, which builds that loyalty and helps you be a better version of yourself. And so I see potentially when brands start kind of flooding into that space, trying to say, okay, Meta, like suggest my brand. There's like a bidding environment or retail media or advertising ecosystem built around that recommendation that you get in that lens. That's where FindMind can come in, because we can say, all right, well, don't just like push this specific product for any old reason. Push what's important to the brand and style it in a way that is authentic to the creative direction of that brand, so you're getting the brand's point of view, not just the wisdom of the crowd's point of view.
Speaking of paradigm shifts, we have seen a shift in the way people shop with the rise of social media, particularly TikTok. I know some of your clients include Lululemon and Vineyard Vines. They both have a large TikTok presence. Are they nervous, apprehensive about a potential TikTok ban?
I think a TikTok ban is a blessing and a curse when you think about what brands are going to feel about it. On the one hand, obviously, there's tons of traffic and sources of revenue that come from that channel. But on the other hand, there's also a leak from the brand's sort of core properties to a place like TikTok, because we talked about it earlier, the scale issue of trying to inspire your customers for every single product. If I go to buy this blazer and I don't see it styled in a lookbook, or I don't know all the different outfits to wear with it, guess where I'm going to go? I'm going to go to TikTok or Instagram or one of these places and just put in thick blazer, thick white blazer, and just see what kind of inspiration I get. And that's really an opportunity for the brand to reclaim that expertise in that moment and then sell the customer the jeans and the shoes and everything that goes with it. So that's kind of the blessing side of it. And then I think all the brands that we work with, they're all kind of thinking about user-generated content. They're all thinking about influencers and how they can capitalize on the kinds of consumers who don't necessarily want the brand to tell them exactly what to do. Because I think all of us as consumers, we want expertise from the brand sometimes. We want it from our friends sometimes. We want it from influencers sometimes. We want it from non-celebrity people who are just, like us sometimes. And so you kind of have to cover all of those different bases to give the customer everything that they need. So I think it's going to be both a blessing and a curse if TikTok does get a ban.
I know you have been embracing AI for a decade, but do you think if a company is not embracing AI overall, they're being left behind in this space right now?
I think it's still early days. I think there's plenty of time to get your feet wet. I liken this to sort of the beginning of the internet, or the beginning of using computers for stuff, right? Now, if you say we use computers to do banking, it's well, duh, you and everybody else, right? That's how it will be to say, we use AI to do X in the future. Maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. We don't know how long, but it's coming. It's just such early days now that if you don't, I hate to see companies being what's our AI strategy? We need to figure out how to bring AI in. That's the wrong way to approach it. It's what are our problems? What is the strategy we're trying to solve for our business, for our industry, for our customer? And if AI can support you in getting to that goal, that's a great application for AI. But AI for AI's sake tends to always be a fool's errand of a lot of money and a lot of wasted time and a lot of frustration.
Do you think AI in your case promotes brand loyalty?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I started the company based upon is when I had a really great interaction with a store associate or a beauty counter expert or someone who really oozed the brand expertise, I just found myself going back to that more often. I can feel that part of my brain almost clicking into gear, this is one I trust. Versus when when you buy a product and you don't wear it right away, or it doesn't quite ever fit into your living room, and you're just every time you look at that chair, you're I just don't know, you question yourself, you doubt yourself, but you certainly doubt the brand. So if you can make the customer feel confident with their purchases and feel like they're living their best life, it 100% does drive brand loyalty, and we see that in the data.
And what do you say to people who are more bearish on AI, who think the first thought that comes to mind when they think of AI is, hey, is this going to take over my job? Is this going to take over the world? What do you say to them?
I think that's a fair concern, and I absolutely believe that the guardrails need to be in place for things like rights issues. The SAG-AFTRA strike was really all about that. Training on people's creative pursuit to then disintermediate them from the process. I don't believe that that's, I believe that people are right to be concerned about that. In FindMind's particular case, we have to have the seed from the people. The people are necessary but not sufficient. They have to create that beautiful window display and those what is the season all about, but they only do it, again, remember, for 5 or 10% of the product catalog. No one has the time and resources when you're a multi-million-dollar, $1 billion brand to create beautiful editorial moments for every single product you sell and then go back and update them when this product went out of stock and this one's come in and now there's a new trend. They're just, the people to do that don't exist today. So there's no jobs to disintermediate. And then what we do is we cast the people who are doing that work for that 5 to 10% in this very elevated light. They're the creative directors. They're the Anna Wintour behind the whole operation. And then we're just executing it. We're just taking their baton and running with that.
So you're saying essentially, we're not stealing anyone's jobs. We're making your life easier.
Making their life easier and almost elevating what they do. One of our investors is this woman she's just been in retail and C-suite and kind of senior VP roles her whole career. And the way she described it was, you give me time back to do the part of my job that I love, which is the deeply creative work. It's really fun to create one outfit. It's really fun to design a furniture set, but it's really boring and tedious to do the 15,000th one, right? You max out super fast. So like, let's let them do what they do, which is creative and fun. And then we just replicate it at scale and everybody wins.
Can you talk about who are your investors? What do they look like? What are their backgrounds?
Yeah, great question. We have a whole kind of running the gamut of investors. And so who led our Series A was a company called Greyhawk Capital. The partner is this guy, Brian Smith, who is just a very pedigreed kind of Silicon Valley investor, SaaS software, not necessarily retail, not necessarily AI. He's a generalist SaaS investor and just very disciplined in what he does. And he saw two things. He saw kind of the market opportunity for AI, and then the roster of customers we have paying us real money to solve a real problem. And so that's kind of one camp of investors. It's like the Silicon Valley VC type. But then we have angels like the one I mentioned before. Her name is Sarah Wallace. She's the COO at Minted, which is a home design and furnishings marketplace. And she came from Gap, and then she came from Walmart prior to that. So the retail folks, I think, really get it. And then the AI folks as well. We have some investors who are just, they've been doing this for more than a decade. They've been doing this for 20, 30 years and really have seen the opportunity that AI has opened up for a really big financial return in the application that we've chosen.
So you, along with some of your investors, have years and years of experience in AI. What do you think's missing from the national conversation then when it comes to AI? Because there is this debate of, A, this is really helpful, this will move our society at breakneck speed, this is a paradigm shift. There's the other debate of people more scared, is this going to steal my job, like we talked about earlier?
It's such a good conversation to have for any paradigm shift. I mean, we had to have it around computers. We had to have it around the internet. We had to have it around social media. There's so many good things that social media have done for humanity, and there's so many dirty, bad, awful things that it has done, and you can't paint it all with the same brush. So I think it takes a very disciplined and time-intensive approach to have these conversations that a lot of times I think that people who are involved in the conversation aren't willing to take the time to have that, right? I'm talking about in Congress, I'm talking about kind of, like think tank groups and stuff that talk about AI. We're missing a lot of what we should be thinking about, and we're spending too much time talking about the things we shouldn't spend so much time talking about. It's tricky.
Michelle, I appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thanks again.